Good afternoon for joining me. I'm back to the live stream. It is very lovely today, very nice weather, just on the cusp of being a little bit too warm, like it was last week, and is shaping up to be again for the rest of this week. We had a brief respite over the weekend, a little bit of rainfall to cool things off again. Quite a lot of thunder. I really thought we were going to get a proper thunderstorm, but it just rained a bit in between and then mellowed out again. Nothing really came of it. Today is, or so I've been told, apparently Amazon Prime Day. I haven't had an Amazon Prime subscription in quite a while. I do remember back when I first became a student and the offers out to get a free 1-year subscription as a student. I would check each year at university on Prime Day what offers there were available, browsing through Amazon, seeing if there's anything useful. And there never ever was. It was always the exact same nonsense stuff to put in your home and take up space for no reason, and hardly ever anything useful. Really, it's like any other sale. You should never go and buy something just because it's on sale. You should find something you want to buy, and then when it happens to be on sale, you go and grab it. The one time I will admit I do sometimes break that rule is with the Steam sale. We do have a summer sale going on right now as well, and while I tend to stick to stuff on my wish list and stuff that's, 50-60% off, now and then I see something on the homepage where it's like, oh, here's a particularly popular game that happens to be majorly discounted. I'm just like, oh, that wasn't really on my radar. I was thinking register, but no, it's radar. That wasn't really on my radar, but discounted that much for like £2-3. You can treat yourself to a little something. Some people like their cup of coffee each week. I like to buy a little £2 incremental game. I've been playing a few recently. Got into what's it called? Unnamed Space Idol. And it's pretty good. There's a very difficult balance between making an idle incremental game actually, incremental idle running in the background kind of stuff, and giving you enough active stuff to do for it to be a game as well. And I think this one hit the mark really well. I needed something to replace the Deca Dragons that I finished a while ago, and then I also played, I can't remember the proper name, something livestock replication program or whatever it was called. That one was quite fun as well. A little bit of a shorter one with a defined ending, a bit more like Space Plan in that regard. I might do a video or a live stream at some point in the future talking about all of the incremental games I've played, because it's quite a few at this point, and I feel like there's some insight to be gathered in all of that somewhere. For now, though, let's move the scene on over and let's get back to this. We are once again in the setting of Twins Cross. I think last thing we did was I had moved a bunch of this stuff over to Obsidian Notes and done a little bit of lore writing for the old and new city and the industrial court and abandoned district. And now it's time to expand a little more on what's actually in the city. I'm still planning at some point to put some time into coming up with various people we can have around town, but frankly I am putting that off repeatedly because it is so difficult to write characters for me, because I get so caught up on their names. What should they be called? Because I feel like it completely changes the whole vibe of a character, what they end up being called. And if I can't think of a fitting name, then sometimes I'll rework a character and their personality and such to better fit the good names I can think of. What we're going to do instead today, then, is come up with some more places. Specifically, shops for all of our magicians and sorcerers and everything else that lives in this intriguing little city. we know that there are going to be some services provided by certain groups. So, for example, the Bay Clubs, who run mundane banks and probably run magical, yeah, that was correct, magical ones as well. Now, obviously this is a group with its own interests, so they're likely not going to be fully trusted by everyone in Twins Cross. There's going to be groups that aren't going to want to put their valuables into the hands of what is essentially a rival faction. But when it comes to just wealth, the things that are maybe valuable not to that particular individual but just in general, it probably is worth using a notionally neutral service like this. There's obviously going to be a lot more politics involved. There's going to be groups that are on such bad terms with the Bay Clubs that they refuse, and of course the two are going to have competing services. But I imagine the competition between them probably spurs them on to not screw people over, because they need the good reputation to take business away from their rivals. So let's note that down. Many groups will be bad terms with them, or just anyone with valuables. However, sometimes having something safely stored is worth it. The Bay Clubs in competition with each other, they are motivated to offer a service. Probably helps them with their claims to legitimacy as being the governing body and overseers for all Twins Cross. They have to provide some amount of government-esque services if they want to convince people that they are the rightful owners. Individuals who lack a faction to look after their valuables and also don't have any allegiances that would drag them into the play games. City. Make up the book customers. Go. Right, like if you're just some guy, you're whatever mage puttering around the place just minding your own business, then the Bay Clubs probably don't have any strong incentive to try and screw you over. Even if you do give them something really valuable that they want to get their own hands on, is it really worth it for one item, one time? No one's going to give, you know, genuine treasures over to be stored in some vault. It's going to be stuff that's valuable but not unique. So really it wouldn't make any sense for them to take anything, and there's good reason for people to trust that the bank will look after their belongings. I'm imagining this like not you know, the way most people in the modern day use a bank, where it's just for the convenience of a credit or debit card and having money in there for payments, since we'd already established previously that both Bay Clubs and the Twins Cross Bank are investing in having people use physical currency in the city as much as possible, both the magical and the mundane. You're not really using those services, so much more than that, the bank is somewhere to store valuables, like vaults basically. for various magical objects or just highly valuable objects. There's probably a fair few people who have stashes of precious gems or metals or famous artworks and stuff like that stored over here. Then besides that, of the already existing groups we have, there's obviously University Library Committee, who run a library. Now the question is, how much access do they really give anyone to any of the stuff in the library? Because they're going to be pretty secretive, right? Like the idea was supposed to be that they share knowledge, the various subgroups, subdepartments, share knowledge with each other, but even that is already not quite working out. They're probably going to be very unwilling to share anything of note with outsiders. This is not going to be an actual library that's a place to gather great knowledge or that. Potentially, hang on. I'm here, aren't I? Committee is such a strange word. Potentially, there will be no proper magical library open. All since the subgroups of the committee barely share each other. However, there is a hall library, mostly consisting of borderline propaganda from various magical groups. The texts do technically teach some things about magic, but heavily by more a practice. The Bane clubs and yeah, I mean, you could put an R in there. I'm pretty sure it still works without it, but if it will make Google Docs happy. The Bay clubs and a couple of the servant and ship or cults are the biggest contribute, well as a few individuals looking to legacy. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, I think. So you have a library technically, but it's only the stuff that people are motivated to want out there and want shared. So the Bay clubs are going to put forward like magical histories and stuff like that try to paint them in a good light. Various cults are going to put forward basically indoctrination texts that are still useful to mage because they do include actual ways to gain power, even if it's usually at a big disadvantage. They're probably not offering very good deals to outsiders. And then individual mages who, for one reason or another, think that they're nearing the end or who are about to embark on a dangerous journey or leaving town for some other reason, and want to have some mark preserved on the city. You know what? Actually, let's change this a little bit. They don't fund a proper library of their own. The subgroups of a committee barely share with each other. However, there is a substantial collection of text, mostly consisting of borderline propaganda. Yeah, I think now with this, thinking about the various places where this is coming from, and the sort of time frame that it's been happening in, they probably do actually have a fairly big collection. There's going to be a lot of people, not a lot of it's going to be good. You're going to have to really know what you're looking for and sift through a lot of books to find something really worthwhile, but there will be some genuinely valuable texts hidden amongst the rest of the stuff that is just, basically self-published authors and propaganda texts. Not really a shop though. A bank? Kind of, but not really. The library, also not a store really by any definition, more of services offered by the city. Was it Harrison and Phillips? Are these the lawyer guys? Not really different power. Oh, this wasn't lawyers, this was straight up demon deals with the devil. Circle. Well, nah, none of these guys. Okay, yeah, no one else here is really going to be offering business stuff. Let me just have a sip real quick. So what we want to think about then broadly is what kind of shops might people run, and what is the magical twist on them. I suppose to a certain extent also what makes them worth visiting for other mages, but not worth trying to take over. How do you get a point of interest that's interesting enough to be known and of use by the magical community, but not so much that one of the big players in town is going to do something about it, and not so much that we count them as their own big player? Because I do want to include a few more major factions in the city, but these, what I'm looking for here, are really just going to be like shops. The part of the answer for this, of course, is going to be that some are local and small scale. They're useful to some of the less powerful mages in a neighborhood, but more. Another answer is going to be that they offer something nice, but not technically that valuable. That second one is kind of the thought that brought up this entire stream, because I was thinking at some point about Twins Cross and stuff that was in it, and one of the things that popped into my mind was, you know, a mage going for a cup of coffee and having a magical barista or whatever, and then that got me thinking, oh yeah, a magic coffee shop would be the kind of thing that would make perfect sense for this kind of city with the sheer amount of mages and stuff they have in it. And a magic coffee shop really doesn't even technically need to be selling any magical coffee. It doesn't need to be magical of its own in any real way. It could just be a place that happens to acknowledge magic exists, and where you don't have to hide any magical stuff you've got, or you can talk about magical business openly, you know, instead of university students sitting there doing their homework. You've got library committee members sitting there writing up notes on some spell they're studying. So, coffee shops. Casual places to just not have to hide that you know about magic. Then possibly themed shops or certain types of practitioner that potentially ones, you know, like shops around here right on the edge of town that are very, you know, lots of plants in them, very I don't want to say hipster or hippie, but it's the best word I can come up with off the top of my head. But I have that kind of vibe where some of the Horace Scott cults are going to be comfortable coming into them. Whereas you might have a really fancy, expensive, overpriced coffee shop somewhere around the old city. Because the Bay Clubs are not going to run their own coffee shops. They're way too proud for that. Way too arrogant, basically. Even though it probably would be a good idea. So they're going to leave that to someone else, and someone's going to take advantage of the opportunity to make a lot of money. And then of course you're going to have ones that serve actually magical coffee. Or magical drinks, I guess. It doesn't have to be coffee specifically. Just any sort of beverage. A sip real quick. What else could make a coffee shop interesting but not worth taking over for Magician? Some of them are possibly going to be run by magical beings that aren't interested in more of outside world, but are too strong to remove the takeover. Or are too useful to have access to. There will probably be places where various groups are trying to entice some outside creature to come and take up residence. So when one just decides to do so of its own accord, they're probably going to be pretty happy about that and perfectly willing to play along with whatever stuff it's got going. If that stuff happens to be running a little store somewhere, then that works. Bars were run on similar principles. Restaurants, I feel like a restaurant is slightly less casual, slightly less, I don't know, it doesn't have the same vibe as a coffee shop or a bar. How would a restaurant? Ugh, excuse me. Or just food places in general. Would any random food stall that happens to be run by a mage count? Is technically a magical establishment if it's just one guy behind the counter who knows magic, but if he's not doing anything with it, it's maybe even in public, then no, probably not. The place has to be for magicians or offer some exclusive services on it to qualify. Otherwise, it would be any place where mages happen to work. I suppose it's worth thinking about what kind of fits into this world, because you could have any establishment, right? Like you could have a magical swimming center or something. But is that really something that's worth putting in here? Does that add anything? Is that even interesting? How would, like, when I think about how that would look, if it's still just short of putting sea monsters into the water, which is excessive for this kind of setting, we're not doing that kind of casual magicry. You know, you could put that in, like, Percy Jackson, but here? No, I don't think so. I think if you had a body of water with sea monsters somewhere in the real world, it would have to be really cut off, really carefully managed, and you certainly aren't going swimming there. So something like that wouldn't fit in here. A coffee shop or a bar, they have those kind of, some of them at least, you know, not any random coffee shop, not your local Starbucks or whatever, but certain coffee shops do have that kind of hidden in a niche kind of vibe to them. I'm saying kind of a lot, where there could be something magical going on there. There's a very nice webcomic I read called How to Be a Werewolf, where one of the main characters works at a coffee shop, or owns a coffee, I think her parents own the coffee shop, or did, and now she owns it, I'm not sure. She might just work there and I could be misremembering, it hasn't come up in the story in a while. But yeah, coffee shops and bars definitely feel like places where this kind of thing makes sense. Besides that, restaurants. A restaurant I think only works if it's a super fancy one. Extremely fancy with floating plates and magic candles and serving griffin steak like that. Otherwise it just doesn't seem fitting or worth the effort for someone to create. There's going to be a kind of gap. Let me put that at the top. There's a gap of fanciness. There's probably a better word for that. There's a gap between the casual establishment, which are mostly honey bots again. Where's the band? There it is. Anyway, there's a gap between the casual establishments, which are mostly just places for mages to hang out, not stress about hiding themselves, and the high-end establishments that deal in luxuries and magical goods that are just deal in luxuries and magical goods. It's not that hard for people of any level of power to get their hands on something magic related, but it probably is a lot harder to get your hands on the really valuable stuff. Now, would there be a kind of general auction house for this kind of magic thing? I'm gonna say no. I feel like that's that's too coordinated, too almost civilized. The people here are way too fractured for something like that to exist. You know, when we were talking about the amount of suspicion and trust that would be involved with the... Oh. Excuse me. Suspicion and trust that would be involved with the bank vaults. I cannot imagine that that would function for an auction house. There's just no way that people would trust each other enough to do something like this, to show up there in large crowds, to leave their items there, to have the payment go through someone else. No, those kind of trades happen person to person. There are going to be specialists who grow certain things, so, you know, a herbalist potentially, an alchemist. I'm gonna say no, not one that's setting up a store anyway. What's the term? A couturier? Really? I spelled that correct? Huh. Yeah, someone who makes clothing, I think, or gear and equipment. You know, a few specialist crafts people that make equipment. So, clothing, weapons, magic wands and staves. You know, implements, like some magic stone you can look through as a magnifying glass that makes it possible to read off of a cursed grimoire and things like that. Grimoires. Now that I'm writing this, maybe there would be a kind of middle ground. Gap between a casual establishment, which are mostly just places in which to hang out and not stress about hiding themselves, and a high-end establishments that deal. On one hand, there are casual establishments, which are mostly just places for mages to hang out and not stress about hiding themselves. Then there are people and specialists who make goods that are very common and in high demand, but not everyone wants to go through the great effort to make them themselves. Everyone wants to or can go through the great effort to make them themselves. On the high end, or on the other hand, there are high-end establishments that deal in luxuries and magical goods. No, just luxuries. I think high-end magical goods, if the mid or low tier magic goods are being handled by these kind of craftspeople, then we're not going to have that kind of stuff in the very high-end stuff. You might still pay extra to have a really fancy one. Some of these guys are going to be... Yeah, this is not really like a lower, middle, upper class kind of thing. This is a casual to serious or casual to formal scale. On a casual side, you have just spots to hang out, almost like speakeasies for magicians, where in the rest of the world you have to hide your magic from the mandate. in these locations you can let your guard down a little, and it's just somewhere you go to chill. Then there's these which are, these are professionals, these are specialists. You're going shopping there, you're not hanging out. You go to buy something or put in an order and then be on your way. And then on the very formal end, you have the stuff that's luxury. The things that you can pay for if you feel so inclined, but there's really no reason to do so. If you're doing this, you're indulging or trying to show off your wealth. And something like a coffee shop can probably fit into these two categories, if not this one. Okay, so then back to your types of coffee shops, bars, restaurants, herbalists, various specialty craftspeople. What else? What else is someone magical going to potentially want to buy? What are they going to want to get their hands on? What might they need made? I'm trying to picture a mage in my head. What they're wearing, what they're using, what they're doing, and then think about where they might need to get that from. Honestly, this might almost be too broad of a category because it really does cover a lot of stuff. Or maybe this is exactly the point I need to be looking at. A lot of these things are almost one-off purchases or occasional purchases. What's a service you're going to want to come back for regularly? Something you're going to want to use again and again or get remade? Something that's consistently useful. Transportation, maybe? Magical transportation? Would it be worth the effort and risk to cross the city with magic rather than a car? Probably not. And then besides that, travel out of the city, travel to different dimensions. These are all options. Take another drink. There was a lot of thought that I spent on thinking about places outside reality and what kind of stuff might be set up there. I mean, one of the things we established previously was that a likely barrier towards magical advancement and potentially a reason for why magical knowledge might get lost fairly regularly is because after a certain point, when you're cutting yourself off from reality, you need to be careful you don't end up adrift out in out in a different dimension. And since so much of the power in this setting is drawn from creatures outside of reality, those creatures have to come from somewhere, which means there have to be other planes out there. So there's going to be a lot of focus on different dimensions. Potentially that might mean you're going to want a travel service to go to those different places. And someone's going to be incentivized to offer that. Then what else? Potentially also, deliveries and logistics. Right, lots of people playing Death Stranding 2 recently, even in a world with... Well, what's the lore end of that game? I've never played it myself or even watched a playthrough, but isn't it like the rain makes you old if it touches you? Like you get aged by the water? even in a world like that, someone's got to deliver packages and get things from point A to point B, supplies and the like. So is there something similar in this world? But that suggests a level of, again, like, development and civilization that just doesn't fit the factious nature of this place. Similar to whatever other thing I discarded earlier. Oh, the auction house, right, the centralized auction house. Similar to that. That's just too coordinated. There might be individual couriers, there might be the occasional very enterprising individual who maybe has had the talent, the skill, the knowledge to slip outside reality and step onto the playing field of more powerful wizards, but then fail to actually bring their own power up to that level. But now, in an effort to get the resources to do that kind of thing, they're taking courier jobs. They're making use of their access to places other people can't or aren't willing to go, and making up for their lack of power. That would work. That gives us a potential spot to come up with some interesting characters later on. So let's make a note of that. Individuals who have the skill and knowledge to step outside of reality into the playing field of I don't want this to turn into like urban fantasy cyberpunk, where you've got a bunch of edge runners or street samurai taking on gigs from fixers. Because again, that's too centralized, that's too coordinated, that's too organized and formalized for this kind of setting. So it's probably going to be just a couple of people who do work for a couple of people they know. They're not probably advertising their services in general. You couldn't convince them to take some package from an unknown party to an unknown location. They're only going to places that they're well familiar with and customers that they're well familiar with, because otherwise they'd be taking way too huge a risk. They'd be almost certain to get screwed over or die somehow somewhere along the way. Okay, so couriers or explorers potentially. What else? I'm trying to think of local shops I've got here. A lot of it won't be applicable, like a butcher or something, a baker. Not a thing you'd have in a magical world. It doesn't fit into any of the categories. You know, luxury food is going to be in restaurants. You're not going, you know, like the super powerful mage is not going to go down to the bakery for their artisan loaf. They're gonna go get a full meal or even have their own chef if they can somehow arrange that. I doubt you're gonna get many mages willing to be someone's personal chef. Yeah, it doesn't fit into this. It's not a casual hangout spot like a bar or a coffee shop would be. A club, perhaps? A nightclub? Yeah, a nightclub makes sense. extension of the concept, but now with more music and dancing. Definitely, you totally have nightclubs and music venues around the place. Probably really insular ones, like only for specific magical communities. Yeah? In the same way that the forest cults are probably gonna throw some midsummer bonfire party off in the woods, there's gonna be a bunch of like small techno cults that all follow a different machine spirit and who all meet up at a club somewhere in a new city. Something like that. Very insular. Some communities will have them, some won't. You know, the circle of community, the witch group here, they probably don't have anything like that. The circle of community might have some members who run a local coffee shop. They might even have a bar, depending on what kind of vibe I end up going for with them when they're fleshed out further. But they won't have the restaurant. They will have plenty of craftspeople. They might have a herbalist. Couriers or explorers, no, that doesn't fit their vibe at all. A nightclub, definitely not. They won't have anything like that. My nose is getting a little bit blocked here. Give me just a second to blow my nose. Alright, that's much better. And not forgetting to unmute this time. I will never be able to get over the stream I did at this point quite a long time ago, playing EU4, muting to blow my nose, and then just straight up forgetting to unmute for a full hour. Just a full hour of silence in that VOD. Painful, painful, painful. I was playing Anbana at the time, which just got a big update the other day. Some reworks on some stuff and lots of mission trees, but I'm not sure if I'm actually gonna go play it at the moment. A lot of the content was just in areas I'm not too interested in. You know, some reworks of the Empire of Anbana, some stuff for the lizard people, I'm not too keen. One mission tree for a Harpy nation, but they're off in the north and it's a different faith to the hunt. I really prefer the main Harpies. I did see that apparently the roost system has gotten a rework, so I might go do a Harpyland run or something like that. Not sure yet. But that probably won't be on stream, because on stream some point later this week I'm going to be continuing the Touhou Universalis run. For now though, focusing back in on Twins Cross. Other shops, other services. What else is there? If I'm thinking of, I'm picturing like the John Wick suiting up scene and the various places he goes. And stuff like that might exist in this world, but it's going to be, again, more fractured. It's not going to operate on this centralized system with the council and the hotel and those coins they all accept. It's going to be far more individual, who you happen to be know kind of level. Who you happen to know kind of level, not who you happen to be know. Who you happen to be, who you happen... What was I mixing up there? I'm not sure. Right, and that's going to fit a lot into the craftspeople, so like the suits, there's going to be a tailor somewhere. Well, the guns, there's going to be a weaponsmith or a blacksmith somewhere. All very individual, small-scale operation. And you need to find something that fits with whatever particular sort of magic you happen to be using. You've got to find something suitable for yourself. So yeah, that will be a lot more fragmented, a lot more insular to each community. Besides that, I suppose you could have some people trying to change the situation. Someone could be trying to set themselves up as a mediator, as a fixer kind of type. Do I want to include something like that? I feel like it's fairly likely that someone will try, but would they actually see any success at all, or can we basically just write them off as irrelevant? I think I'd like to say you can write them off as irrelevant because it just wouldn't fit the vibe of this setting, and I think the city's history and its present circumstances probably make it so that none of the locals are particularly open or friendly towards that kind of approach. Yeah. Alright, so what else? What else? Vehicles, maybe? You would have someone who can soup up your car magically, but that falls under a craftsperson. I'm not even sure if you could do that kind of stuff. I think that might not slip past the notice of a mandate. Probably not. Would you have teachers? No, absolutely not. Individual mages will teach an apprentice if they're so inclined. Organizations will train new acolytes. Certain more open cults will just take in anyone who happens to share their mindset, stuff like the demon worshipping ones. Yeah, but official teachers that you can go to and be like, oh, I want lessons in this. That's not going to happen in this kind of world. That's not fitting. What else? I'd like to think of at least one more example we can put on here. Wonder if there's a fantasy shop generator or professions. No, these are not proper search results. Professions stores. Why are there now bloody adverts? Fucking business name. No. Pet shop? Nah. Too magical. Too openly magical. This is very underground magic. More limited magic. Oh. Shops specifically not about magical things, but that cater to magician customers who might not want certain questions asked. So stuff like a gun store. That could be interesting as well. Because a lot of the stuff, right, like I talked before about how it would make much more sense if two magical groups are in conflict for them to try and seek out some mundane means to take each other out. So regular weapons probably make sense for something like this. Gun store, hotels and housing. So these are still places. These are a different category from the coffee shops. You know, this kind of category, because you still have to hide yourself there. So mundane services that turn a blind eye to certain activities from magicians. There you go. You are going to be out and about as a mage in these places. You're still hiding, It's just that if you happen to show the right hand sign or draw a rune or whatever, then the shopkeeper knows, okay, this person is not going to be able to pass the what is it called? I'm pretty sure there's some name for whatever thing you need to own a weapon, but that's in like America, not in the UK, so I have no idea what that's actually called. Like, you know, they're not going to be able to pass their background check because they've erased their background in order to get rid of that connection, right? So these kind of places will cater to people like that. There might be some that are magic specific. You might find an individual who's a counterfeiter slash forger, something like that, who happens to be magical, and that'll be just one guy doing it, but you might also have a business that does that kind of stuff anyway, and knows not to ask too many questions when certain customers come in. I think that might be all the ideas I have for this for the moment. Very short stream, only an hour, but no reason to have a concept overstay its welcome, and I don't generally like to pivot into something new partway through the stream. I think I'll just call this one here. I'll try to do a much longer stream, hopefully tomorrow, playing EU4. If I can make that happen, should be able to. The way things look right now. And then I'll clean this stuff up, get it transported over to Obsidian Nodes, and then start, you know, coming up with some specific examples of each of these stores, putting names to stuff, the dreaded names that I keep trying to put off. I'll try to put together a list of suitable names between streams, and then I can finally get to work on putting some people into this setting, because it's about time to have someone that we can actually write about and, you know, start putting them in situations. Because it's been a little while since I've actually sat down and done a bit of creative writing. Lots of world building and theory crafting and stuff like that, but not much just setting a scene. I might try and bring back the thing I used to do for a short while of doing a little writing exercise. Doing a little writing exercise at the start of each stream, where I take a prompt from somewhere and just write like a paragraph or two. We'll see. For now, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've had a good time, and I shall see you all next time.